It's Lucy Litch, and this is Tiny House Conversations. It's the Australian-based podcast where I interview experienced tiny houses, tiny builders, and adventurers in the tiny world so you can discover how to create, build, and transition into tiny life. So you want to go tiny, but you might be wondering, where can I park my tiny house? I want to let you know that I have a special unreleased podcast episode of tiny house parking success stories from other tiny houses who were just like you and who have easily managed to find a long-term parking space for their tiny home. Some of them have even found more than one space. So if you want ideas on finding a parking space for your tiny, you can download this episode for free. To get access to it, head over to tinyhouseconversations.com/tiny parking. If you enter your details there, I'll send it straight to your inbox. Now let's intro today's episode. Hey, it's Lucy bringing you another episode of Tiny House Conversations. Joining me on the show today is Marie Beringer, who is an experienced tiny houser originally from France and is living in Auckland, New Zealand. Marie DIY built her tiny home with the help of some friends and is currently doing an apprenticeship in carpentry. Marie's DIY story is so inspiring, and in this conversation we talk about where to start when it comes to DIY building a tiny house, Marie's off-grid setup and the challenges of creating a self-sufficient life, how Marie found a parking space for her tiny home. We also talked about women in building and carpentry, a realist misconception about living in a tiny house, and so much more. So, on to the show with Marie. Hi, Marie. Thanks for joining me on Tiny House Conversations. It's so good to have you here today.
Hi, Lucy. It's so good to be here.
So, Marie, you live in a beautiful tiny home in Auckland, New Zealand, but you're originally from France. How did you first end up in New Zealand? And then where did you first hear about tiny houses?
I was studying environmental science in France, and I needed, for the end of my study, to do like a few months internship. And my mom has a restaurant that is on, it's like in between beautiful lakes in the top of a mountain. And there's a lot of people that hike. There's so many people from everywhere around France. And she said, there's so many people coming in the restaurant. Why don't you advertise that you need an internship in the mirror on the, like in the toilet? Because everyone goes to the toilet and everyone wash their hands. So they're always going to read if there's something written on the mirror. One day, a girl who has done an internship in New Zealand, she saw the advertisement and she came up to my mom and said, if your daughter is interested, I know a company that are taking interns, and it's like a wastewater treatment plant. So it was exactly what I was studying at the time. And so I came to New Zealand for that internship, and I absolutely loved the country. And when I came back to France, I came back for like a year. And after that, I was like, yeah, I'm done with France. I need to go to New Zealand. I was in love with this place and the people, and everything about this country is amazing. So after that, I was here for a few years. And then I think it was on Pinterest or YouTube. I saw pictures of a tiny house on wheels, and I started just being a bit obsessed with it for another few years, and I was saving up for it, I guess. As I had a full-time job for probably 5 years. I was annoying everyone that I was meeting about tiny houses, and it was my dream to build a tiny house, and one day I'm going to do it, and blah, blah, blah. So that's how I heard about tiny houses. It was a really small movement, I guess, a few years back, and then now it's very mainstream.
Yeah, it is for sure. It's definitely picking up momentum over this side of the world. And I'm wondering, because I know that you built your own tiny house. So what was it that made you decide first, like that you wanted to go down this path and then actually build your own, doing it yourself?
In the tiny house movement, I guess people are just out of nowhere. They decided they're going to build a tiny house without any experience. I think that's a cultural thing. Like in France, you can't do anything if you don't have a degree. Like you can't just build a house. If you're not a builder, you need to be an engineer or study for 5 years, something special. So when I came here and I saw those YouTube videos on people that started in America or New Zealand, of those people starting their own tiny house build, I'm like, can you actually just do it like that? Like out of nowhere, you just decide you do it and you're doing it. I thought it was absolutely crazy. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to do that too, because it's the coolest thing on earth to just build your own house, like without anyone like telling you what to do, really. So this is how I decided. It was just like an incredible challenge. And I think in a weird way, everyone should be able to build a house or like anything really, like be able to use your tools and fix things. It's an incredible skill. So I was like, well, I guess if I can build a tiny house, I can build anything. So yeah, that was the inspiration. I was just blown away by those people that just decided that it was possible to do something like that.
Yeah, and I love how you said that everyone should be able to do this kind of thing, because it made me think about, I often talk about, and just in my own life and philosophy that I kind of live by, is like looking at the way that our ancestors lived and who are we as humans. And it seems to be that there is this innate capability, although maybe we've lost it along the way, of like having to build our own shelter and grow our own field and build a fire and these types of real primal things that made us human. And so, but then on the other hand, there can be this like mental limitation of, oh, I don't know if I can actually do that. That would be really hard and it's out of my comfort zone and all these types of things. I'm wondering if you experienced any of that for yourself. Like you said you did it because it was going to be a good challenge and all of that. But did any of these like mental limitations come up at the same time and you're like questioning things, or you just like, nah, I'm just going to do it?
A bit of both, actually. I was like, there's no way I'm not doing it. At that point, I was like, this is happening. But it was so nice actually to feel like it was the right thing for me. Before that, I had all of those doubts about like anything I would take on in life. I was like, I'm probably not good enough for this. Like, I'm probably not going to be able to do that or teach myself this skill. Building my tiny house, because of those people who were doing it, I was like, okay, I guess it's possible. And then I was thinking like this, if I can build a tiny house myself, I can probably do anything. So it was like this, I wanted to prove myself and anyone else, because I had no experience. I'm not that kind of person that can just pick up something really quickly. Like you've got some people that just start play guitar and after 3 months, they just amazing. Like I cannot teach myself anything in general. It's such a cool skill. And I was like, okay, if I can do this, then I can become that person that actually is possible to start a project, and with the right mindset and organization skills, you can it's just steps, like building a tiny house is just a set of steps and you just follow a plan. And so it's kind of everything in life like that you want to achieve. It's kind of this just baby steps, not necessarily seeing the big pictures and that gigantic challenge that you have to finish. It's just like, okay, what do I have to do now? And it's such a good thing to know, to do anything. So like starting a podcast, I guess, for example, that's like amazing as well. And it's just following steps. But when you see it, it just looks like something amazing, something that is really, really hard to achieve. It's a good school of life, I guess, to do it this way. But yeah, I had heaps of doubts, but I knew it was the right thing to do.
It sounds like you felt that deeper calling. Okay, this is the right thing for me. This feels really aligned. But then at the same time, just as it happens often throughout life, like the mind does come up and, the questions start to come in and the doubt starts to come in. But if you keep listening to and feeling that inner calling and just kind of keep moving forward from there and making decisions from there, obviously really beautiful things can happen. And now you've built your own tiny home, and that's such an inspiration. And I also love how you talked about how it can be this, I guess I can see the metaphor or the mirror for everything that we do in our lives, one step at a time, breaking things down into small pieces. And then all of a sudden these small things add up to big things. And then you've built your own tiny house, or you've started a podcast, or you've done this project, or whatever it might be. So yeah, I can definitely feel that it, and then you look back at, just how far you've come to, and it's like, wow, didn't think I was capable of this, but now look what I've done. And you talked about challenges. I'm curious, what were maybe some of the challenges you experienced during the actual building process?
obviously there is many of them because you're doing something new and you kind of guess, well, you know what to do, but you're never 100% sure. Challenges would be, I just made so many mistakes. But I love to see when those people who are telling me about tiny houses they build, they're like, oh, it was sweat and tears. And but for me, I made like probably 1,000 more mistakes than anyone else who would build a tiny house. So funny. But I don't think I cried once, so I was sad once, because it just taught me to be very resilient. And I was like, I was expecting to make many mistakes. I was like, I don't care. It's just going to take me the amount of time that's necessary. But every mistake, I'm going to learn from it. And I'm going to be able to tell someone else, I made that mistake. Don't make the same mistake. But it felt so right to start this project that every mistake I was like, oh, well, I'm just learning, and that's great. So I had a really cool mindset during that project, but I think it's just because I was so happy to do it. I was like, oh well, it's fine. And I was like so proud of myself for building a tiny house. So the entire time I was like, it's fine, everything is okay, I'm happy. So yeah.
And I'd say also, maybe because you're also working on something that's like really meaningful to you and there's a purpose, and that even if it's challenging, you kind of pick yourself up and you just keep going and you just go, okay, as you said, it's going to take as long as it needs to take. And, you would have learned so much along the way. So that's really cool. And I'm wondering as well, so I know that you talked about, you obviously saw a lot of people online doing their thing with building tiny houses. Where did you actually start when you decided, okay, I'm going to do this? Like, what were kind of some of the first couple of steps that you took when you actually decided this is what I'm going to do?
It's like everything, like, if I talk about my tiny house, everyone is like, oh, that's amazing that you built your tiny house and you did all of that thing. But I talked about it for like 5 years before I started. I was thinking about it for 5 years. I was like, what am I going to do? Where do I start? I don't know anyone in New Zealand. Like, I was by myself. I didn't have my family or like a builder uncle, or like my dad would help me, or someone that would know. I knew no one. And I think the thing, maybe I made like a bedside table with 2 crates like glued together. That was like my only building background before I started. I saw an advertisement on Facebook on a tiny house workshop, and I think this is where most people start, because there is a lot of resources on internet, on YouTube, but usually YouTube videos on people building their tiny houses, but usually it's in America, so it's not really the same as here. So you can't really find everything on internet. So I'd say for anyone that wants to start a tiny house, like a tiny house workshop is usually the way to go. And what I learned, it was amazing. Like, it was the best decision of my life to go into those. I think it was 2 weeks at the time. I learned basically how to use all the power tools I needed, and also didn't really learn how to build a tiny house. I learned how much I would struggle to build a tiny house. We were building 2 amazing tiny houses during those 2 weeks. It was only like the shell of the tiny house, so nothing inside, just the cladding and the framing and the flooring for the trailer. It was too amazing, the very complicated design. So I saw those carpenter and professional builders like struggling a little bit on like, just how to do this or that. And it was just really, really good to see them fixing mistakes or struggling, because it wasn't like a lie on like, this is easy, like we just do this and this and that. And I was like, okay, I need to have a really simple design, and I need to be very organized about the next step, so I'm not gonna struggle so much. But it's normal on the building site to have mistakes and fixing them. But I've never been on a building site. I don't know what's happening there. So just seeing how the builders are working and how they think to solve problems, I think that was one of the good skills I got from that workshop. And from there, I met a few people that were really passionate about tiny houses. That I think it's a friend of mine. He had another friend that had a place where I could start building my tiny house, and he also had tools. So I borrowed his tools for a while, and one of the builder said yes to kind of coach me, I guess, help me with my build. So it would just always be on the phone with me when I needed it. I would call him like, oh, what kind of nails should I buy for this? And he would come like once a month for a weekend to just help me with the heavy lifting. And if there was a big step, he was there to make sure that the house was actually weather tight. Just, I guess, if you build a tiny house, the most important part is just to make sure water cannot get in and it's strong enough. And then once you're inside, then you can basically do most of everything yourself. But for this part, because I was really like new to the tiny house world, I really wanted someone to at least check what I was doing. So those were the first steps I took. Tiny house workshop, find a support group, I guess. And then from there, the hardest part is to start. So once you feel like 50% confident you can do it, you should start it, and everything is kind of gonna, I guess, like fall into places slowly. But yeah, the hardest thing is to start.
I feel like that's always the hardest thing for a lot of things, right? It's like, you want to do it, and it's just literally starting it. Even if you fall over straight away, and you just got to get back up and start it and put the steps in place. And I know that you're living off grid. So are you able to share with us a bit about what kind of setup you have for things like solar, water, your toilet, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I could again talk about it probably for 2 days. But for all the mistakes I'm making as I'm going into that journey of self-sufficiency, because my background is like environmental science. And our generation, like everyone that's been born in the 90s, I guess, we grew up with like all of those movies about the end of the world and climate changing and all that stuff. So it kind of like, I don't know, I feel like I grew up with that weight on my shoulder that I had to do something about it, or that was our generation job to change things. So I always had that, I don't know, that feeling that I had to take care of my own waste, I guess, and just make my own energy, or just try to catch my own water, just because why would that responsibility would fall on someone else? Because I work in a water treatment plant as a job before I started building my tiny house. I know how hard it is to treat water in the process, and how precious drinking water is, and how you can actually use all of your waste to make energy, but it's a lot of work. I guess life is a playground, and why not play with everything you've got around you? So my mission was to try to have a footprint that's maybe not high, I guess. So I would try to make my own energy and try to recycle all of my waste. So I've got rainwater catchment. There's a shed not too far from my house that I'm renting as well. So I've got a water tank there, and then I'm treating all of my grey water outside my house. I've got like a few different things. How can I summarize this to be simple? It took me months to make this thing, but pretty much I'm just making sure it's treated and filtered, and then it goes into my garden, and all of my black water, which is usually from your toilet, that goes into a digester. It's called a digester. So basically it's a big black plastic bag, and there's no air in it. So what's going to happen is like the opposite as, I guess, the compost. There's no air in it. That means that there's bacteria inside of that bag that are going to make methane, and you can collect that methane in another black bag. And with this, you can cook, I guess, with the gas, because it can be used to create a flame, and you can cook from it. So I'm also experimenting with this. I've got different system in place, and again, there's not a book like with instruction on what to do. So you just have to try and fail and try again. So my my system is still like, I'm still learning and making sure everything works. But there's plenty of things that it's not big deal. But for example, like one day I unplugged my pump that was pumping all of my waste in that digester. So there was a little bit of a drama. And then another day, I think there's a leak in the gas bag as well. So I need to fix that. But obviously it's not like a full-time job, but not far, but it's fun. It's something that I really want to get good at. And again, there's no school to be self-sufficient. So you have to discover all of the things that you can do and the things that don't work. But yeah, it's really fun. And I hope one day I'll be good enough so I can maybe teach people or show people how how to be a bit more self-sufficient. But yeah, for now, it's just every day I've got a new joke for my friends about what goes right or what goes wrong. But yeah, it's fun.
I'll bet. And are you using solar panels as well?
Yeah, that's true. I've got a solar power. How would you say that? Solar panels. I've got
Yeah, solar panels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. If I don't have enough sun, I can actually plug my house in the mains. I've got like a hybrid inverter, so you can either decide if you want to use your solar panels or if you want to be plugged in the main. But yes, I just research a lot of like companies that were doing solar panels and things like that in New Zealand. And there's a company that does kind of DIY systems. So I tried that. Obviously had an electrician to install it. So far, it's so good. You turn the light on and you're like, oh, it's just the sun. Like, it's just such a good feeling. But when it turns off and you're in the middle of your hot shower, that's not as fun. But again, I'm learning. And yeah, sometimes there's very cloudy days for a few days, and I need to plug my house and things like this. But yeah, it's so nice to be able to actually produce your own electricity and power.
The company that you mentioned that help you with the DIY solar, just in case anyone is interested, do you have the name of that company? And I can put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, it's called Great Free. And I love their story. They're a really, really cool company because they started out, they wanted to have a solar system on their farm, on their family farm, and they couldn't find anything affordable. So they just started their own company, which is pretty cool. And their goal is really just to do cool stuff and help people with their solar system and small tiny houses like me, I guess, because usually it's big setups for big houses, and they made everything really easy for me to understand because I cannot understand electricity at all. It's just I study biology, and as soon as you talk to me about electricity or power, my brain just goes, no, I can't understand that. So it was really nice to have them kind of helping me along the way and telling me, yeah, you're going to be able to power this and this and this, and you just have to plug this in and you're fine. Very easy. So yeah.
I feel you there. I feel like I'm the same as well. And thank you for that, because I love a good recommendation. And, you know, with the digester that you talked about where you turn the toilet waste into cooking gas, is that a home biogas setup that you have?
Yes, that's it. It's a really cool company as well. Usually you just use your food scrap, and you just put it in the digester. But I'm using, my toilets are connected to it, and I've got a waste disposal. Is that how you call it?
Yeah.
So because when I designed it, I was like, I'm too lazy to just take all of my scraps outside and put it in the digester. So I thought I would connect and then a waste disposal to the digester so I can put all of my scraps, and it goes straight into the digester. So this also, yeah, it's working so far. But I've seen it before. I saw someone do like both incinerator and a toilet going into a digester.
Yeah.
And again, I study that at school, and for my internship, I study digester and wastewater treatment plants. So for me, it's kind of fun because I study that, I feel like I have to experiment and just try new things. So, but yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I'm also curious because, you know, you're in Auckland. So what do you do in the winter for heating? And then what do you do in the summer for cooling?
I had the great idea I had my house was painted brown, and I didn't like it. It was just stained. It's shadow clad outside, so it's just ply. And it was painted brown, and I didn't like it. So I painted black, but now it's very hot in summer. So in summer, I just have a fan inside the house, and like the doors and the windows are always open. I'm always outside. And in winter, literally, if you make a cup of tea or turn the oven on for 5 minutes, it's just really, really hot really quickly because my tiny house is so small. So if I've got an advice for anyone who is designing their tiny house, think about temperature as one of the main concern, because you just want to be comfortable in your tiny house. And if it's big enough and you can afford like an AC unit and a heater, definitely go for this. And also some kind of device that is going to help you renew the air inside your tiny house. I've got like a fan on the wall, but it's heat exchange. So it constantly renew the air inside the house without losing the temperature inside. So I can change it. If it's hot inside, I change it, cold air come inside. And if I want to keep the warmth inside the house, it just like renew the air, but without the cooling of the air coming from the outside. I don't know if what I'm saying is making any sense, but AC units usually, if I'm not wrong, they don't renew the air inside your tiny house. And you're living in such a small space. You want the temperature to be perfect, but you also want it to be really healthy. And often people overlooked air quality. You just you can have like, I guess, the window open all the time, but you can have those system. My one in my tiny house is called Lunos, and it's just like a fan that's really discreet as well, and it just renews the air all the time, because also it can get really humid. So I think it's super important to know what a healthy home is, and of course, design it around good insulation and things like this. But do your research and know what you want as a healthy home. Like, what's healthy home for you? If you want heaps of plants, if you want non-toxic paint and things like this. So, and again, like what you said, temperature is super important. So just really think about that when you design your tiny house. I would change a few things if I could.
Yeah. So what would you change?
To save money, I bought my windows secondhand, and I designed my tiny house around my windows. And obviously, a window that doesn't open is less expensive. So I've got a really big window in front of my bed, and it's beautiful. I've got a beautiful view. But if I knew that it's really, really nice to have like a breeze inside your house, like all the time when it's hot in summer, I would have bought a window that opened, because I've got a small window that opens on the side and my door, but having a third window would have probably changed a lot of things, but I just didn't think about it at the time. So think about the placement of your window if you design your tiny house, because cross breeze is something that can save you a lot of energy, or like you don't have to turn on your fan and things like this. There's small things that you need to think about, but there's not a lot of things I would change, but a few things about temperature, definitely.
Yeah, I guess it's always not until you move into the place and then you learn these different things, you're like, oh, I could have done it like this, or I could have done it like that. And and so you mentioned before, so the cladding, you said it was ply, is that right?
Yes.
And then the framing as well, what have you done for that?
It's timber, so it's just a basic timber framing, because it's easier to work with than steel. And I also wanted to build my own frame. I was like, yeah, why not? It looks like fun. And yes, my cladding, so what's going outside of my house is what we call shadow clad, so that type of ply, and also corrugated iron, because I built my roof myself. So I put roofing sheets on, and I drilled it in the wrong place. So I had to like take everything off and to recycle, I guess, that material. I put it half of my house is kind of metal, like iron sheet on the outside and shadow clad on the other side. And one of my friends came and helped me redo it. Another of my many mistakes. But I learned now. I know where to put the screws when you install your roof.
So you'll know for next time if you have to do it again. What size is your tiny home? You mentioned it's a bit smaller, but yeah, what size is it?
So it's really small, because again, what I learned from this tiny house workshop is if it's your first time, just build a very small box, or as small as you can. From talking to a lot of people who we had that tiny house workshop, and we had like a few volunteers that already had tiny houses. So most of them were saying that they were really scared of small spaces, but now that they build their tiny house, they were like, I could have gone smaller. Like I actually don't need that much space. And I had originally like a quite big design in my head, and I just went really, really small. So my tiny house is 5 meters long by 3.1. And it's 3.1 is like the max you can have for the road. And I just wanted like a house that feels a bit more like a square, not really a rectangle. But that's just like what you like, really, like what's aesthetic for you and what you feel good in. You just have to think about the shape. Like it's the same for the shape of the roof. Some people really like, those gable roof. I found I don't like angles or calculation or math. So I thought I would just go for a mono pitch. So it's literally just a little angle of 3 degrees for your roof. for the water to go down properly and not stay on your roof. And that was it. I was like, this is the only thing I'm going to do. I'm going to build a square, and it's going to be really boring, but it's going to be easy-ish. And yeah, again, I don't have a loft because I was like, I'm going to have to spend money on a scaffold if I do that. So just one level, very small, and I felt like it was more achievable. That's probably why I didn't cry while I was building my tiny house. If I was going bigger, it would be harder. But again, like it's one tiny house. If I want a bigger one, I can maybe build a bigger one. But I thought for a first project, I didn't want to be too ambitious. So it's pretty small, but it's got everything you want. And if you design it for you, it doesn't matter the size. It's just going to be exactly what you need for your everyday life. So it's small, but it's good.
Yeah. And, bigger is not always necessarily better anyway. And I'd imagine that you spend a fair bit of time outside your home. You're not always inside. So I think it's something to be said for just designing your house and your life for, what you want to have in the space, and then where you spend most time every day and what's important to you. And it's really inspiring. And I know that we talked about your different setups that you have for off-grid, and you also mentioned before about self-sufficiency. So what other things have you built around the house on your land when it comes to being self-sufficient?
I heard one of your podcasts before, and there was someone that was talking about tiny house, big shed. Yeah, I absolutely love it. So that's it. When you're self-sufficient, there's no minimalist lifestyle that you can go for. So I've got a big shed, which is basically my workshop, and I build all sorts of things. I tried to build like a little deck with pallets because at the time that's what I had as material. I made an outdoor bath, which is questionable as well, and a composting toilet. So it's just it's a lot of building. I was just trying out things and playing with material and my tools, really. Composting toilet outside because again, I also wanted to try a composting toilet. And when I'm always outside gardening and building things, it's nice to not have to come back inside the house because it's quite a big property. So midway through my house and the garden, I was like, why wouldn't I build like a composting toilet and try this out and see how it goes? But yes, those are the few things I've been building, but I've got many more, and it's just really, really hard to stop.
Moving on to the next thing and the next thing. What else can I create? Do you also have a veggie garden as well?
Yeah, that's not going that great though, but I'm trying really hard. If you want to be self-sufficient, I feel like you kind of have to grow your own food, but I am not that good at gardening. I don't know why. There's so many things that are dying, but I've got heaps of things as well that I've been growing. It's just not as successful as I thought it would be. I thought you just planted it and just water it from time to time, but there's so many things that go into it. And I think it's like this tiny house. I spent a lot of time, designing my tiny house and put a lot of love in it. And I think for my garden, I'm going to have to do the same thing. I'm probably going to have to go to a permaculture course or something like this to try to be a bit more efficient and not just trying to plant something and hope it's going to grow. Probably a bit more to it, but it's again, it's like a school of life. I'm just trying out and seeing what works, what doesn't work. But it's so much fun. You fail, but you're like, oh, I tried. I'm going to try something else now. But yeah, I do have a garden and some chickens. They're all fine, the chickens. No one has died yet. But yeah, it's really, really fun to experiment with just, like all the things that you can get on your own land. Like I've got also an orchard. So I've got eggs every day. I've got a few things from the garden every day as well. And yeah, it just feels so good, but it is so much work.
Yeah. And I guess like the main thing is that you've started, and it may be more work, but I'd also imagine that it would be really fulfilling, to have that self-sufficiency, that you don't need to look at outside sources. Like I think you mentioned something earlier on about, I think it was in regards to water, and it's like, why would you outsource that responsibility to someone else? And I think we can kind of apply that to so many of these types of things, right, including our food system. And obviously it depends on access, and there's so many variables that go into it for different people's situations. But again, it's like if you can put in the little steps to, create these small things that can help you be a little bit more self-sufficient every day, or, each year, or whatever it might be. I think that's a really beautiful way to live, even if it is more work, and even if there is a lot of mistakes. You also learn a lot of lessons, and then you expand your skills and capabilities to do more things than maybe you thought you might be able to as well. And it's really lovely to hear about. And I'm curious as well, how did you find your parking space for your tiny house?
Most people do the same thing. You make a pretty little flyer, and then you go into a lot of little boxes, and you drop off, like a flyer with a picture of your house and what you're looking for around the area you want to live. So I did this heaps of streets in West Auckland, just drop off a lot of those flyers, and also Facebook community pages. And I got a few responses and visited a few places. And there's that lovely couple who told me they just bought a new land and they would love to have a tiny house there. And there's an orchard and a garden already there. And if I wanted to have chicken, I could. So I was like, yep, this is where I want to be. And it's so beautiful. So it was relatively easy, and I hope it's going to be easier and easier as tiny houses are getting a bit more mainstream, that people would just live on other people's land with a caravan or a tiny house or things like this, and build a little bit of more of a community in different lands instead of being so just separated, I guess. Like, it's nice, like tiny houses is kind of forcing you to be in a community, because I'm on that land with my tiny house, but on this land there's another couple of houses, and we sharing the garden together and the orchard, and we also have the shed. So it kind of feels a little bit like a community already, and it's really, really nice. You feel like you've got people around you, and it's not just your neighbors that you never talk to.
It does seem to be part of this reconnecting with community and the land, and helping others care for the land that they're on, especially if buying your own land, or if you don't know someone personally in your own life, if that's not an option, it's a really beautiful way to help someone else have this win-win situation where you get to live on the land and either pay a small amount, or you work in exchange for, being there, and then, helping out on the land too. And it's a win-win situation. Would you be okay with sharing what your exchange is for the parking space?
Oh, yes. So I'm just paying rent for the place. And so I had to pay for my own setup for the water tank, which I guess I can take when I leave. So I've got my water tank, and I'm also renting the shed, which is it's a big space as well. And for that, I'm paying $160 a week, which is like reasonable for what you can find in Auckland. If you want to go somewhere else in New Zealand, you probably pay between 50 and 150 or 200. But it's usually pretty cheap. But Auckland is still a little bit expensive. I would pay, before it was flooding, I would pay, I think, 180, like maybe 3 years ago, for a flat in Auckland. It's still a certain amount, but it's nothing compared to what you would pay now for a flat somewhere in Auckland.
Yeah, definitely. And you get to have your own piece of land and all the things that you have on the land as well. I think that's,
that's true. Yeah. How much you would pay for a house around this area? No idea how much you would rent, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, the rental prices are going up. I'm sure it's the same over in New Zealand as it is in Australia, just for a regular apartment or a house or something too. And are you able to share what the overall cost of building your home was?
Yes, so it was around, if I count my solar system and my biodigester, it would be around, I'd say, between 45,000, probably not 50,000, but 45 definitely. And then for the water tank and all that stuff, it's another like 4,000. It's quite expensive to catch your own water, I guess. And the pump and installing all of this. But cost of the tiny house was around 45,000.
I mean, that's great for everything that you have and what you've created, including having the water tank and all of that. Wow, that's beautiful. And I guess it goes to show as well, when you do a lot of the work that yourself, that you can cut a lot of the costs down too.
Yeah, and recycling a lot of material, that does help. You just have to know which costs are going to be quite big, and see if there's any way you could just find a secondhand option.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. And I want to switch gears here a little bit. So I know that you're currently doing at your carpentry apprenticeship. Are you able to talk a bit more about that and what drew you to want to go down that path?
Yes. So that's why I'm saying like everything is so hard around here. It's because I'm trying to get like my certification in carpentry. So I'm like, I still have to work. I wish I was just here all day and just faff around and build stuff. I've been doing it for like a year and a half, my apprenticeship. So I've got another year and a half to go. And it's I'm building tiny houses as well, which is pretty cool. I'm still obsessed with tiny houses, as you can see. Building tiny houses all day, and I really, really love it. And in the weekend, I've got 2 other jobs that I love as well. One of them is a pole dance instructor, and the other one is I'm working in a community shed, and we're working on teaching women how to use tools. And we just started, so for now, we're just teaching women how to use power tools, and then eventually we're going to have different projects like, I don't know, bedside table or things like this, heaps of things that are coming up. There's so many projects that are really, really awesome coming up, and it's all about carpentry and power tools in my life.
Oh, that's so cool. Did you have some other women help you build your tiny home as well that were interested in the building and the carpentry?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's why it all started there, I think. So I met 2 other women that are passionate about woodworking as well. And now they are both cabinet maker, and we meet for dates. Woodworking dates, and we just all do our own things, but it's really nice to have a community of women we can just bounce ideas on. So if I'm stuck with a design or something I'm trying to do, I just have to talk to Mathilde and Myla. Those are the 2 other women I'm often with. And we just find solution, and it's really, really good. And doing this, I understood how important it was to, I don't know, have like support and a community for anything you do, pretty much. And out of nowhere, I met those 2 amazing women, Sarah and Nikki, who is starting a women's shed, and they wanted more people to teach. Yeah, we're just starting this, and now we're all together in this new adventure, trying to empower women to have their own, I don't know, crew to just do their woodworking together. Because how cool is that? Like, you could just catch up with your friends and make a chair, or I don't know, bedside table, like shelves, fixing something. I just know, like, seeing all of those women with power tools at the end of the day, using a skill saw or drop saw or drills. Just like there's just something in their eyes, they're just like, wow, this is amazing. Like, and you feel really powerful as well. We're working on this at the moment, and it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like a new way to socialize, right? Rather than going down and getting a cup of coffee, or like meeting up and building a chair, or some kind of doing some kind of project. That's really cool. It sounds very, very empowering. And I guess, like, on some level, shifting this perception, or let's call it a perception of like women in carpentry or building, and really showing that it can be done, and it doesn't need to be a space where it's mostly men that are doing it. So I think that's really, really lovely to hear about, and that you're able to, call on those women to help you in your build as well.
Yeah, it was a cool adventure, but I realized growing up that I had many like friends, female friends, and we would just hang out and talk and have a good time. But there was no point in my life where we would just talk about ideas and do stuff or make things. I started pole dancing many years ago, and with other women, you would like be in the studio and we would train together, or like it would be that community of women together. And then I realized how important it was to have something you do, or a goal with other women. And I knew how important it would be to eventually teach woodworking to other women when I knew how important community is. So any passion you have, it's really, really nice to have other women that you can do it with. Yeah, that came out from there. I'm probably going to keep going in that path. But having other people with the same values together, it's so powerful. Yeah, hopefully many more years of fun with a cool community.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's definitely something to be said for, women coming together and having shared values and being supportive and having this deeper understanding of each other, and, what what your passions are. And, we are stronger together. So I think it's, hopefully, so many more of us get to experience that in our own ways. And I'm curious as well, if someone's listening to this, maybe especially if it's a woman who has no building experience or knowledge, but they're curious about building their own tiny house, maybe they feel a bit hesitant or unsure, or they don't feel like they're capable. Do you have anything to say to them, any kind of advice?
If there is any community shed, not too far, if you're in Auckland, just come to the community shed in Auckland. But using power tools is the first one. It's hard for women because also it's not that, if you're a man, I guess you grew up and maybe your dad or your uncle is teaching you that kind of stuff. But if you're a woman, it's not something you kind of like have access to, I guess. But yeah, if you can or borrow someone else's tools, ask someone in your family to help you with a small project. But yeah, if you can join a community shed or a tiny house workshop, that would be the best. That would be really, really cool. But I hopefully in the future, I really want to do this as well. I would love to start a tiny house workshop where women especially would join and they would see at least the theory and a little bit of the practical and all the things I think are essential for you to start. And yeah, eventually that's going to be out, and maybe one day start a YouTube channel where I could just also teach everyone else all the mistakes I made. That would be also really, really cool. So I've got many projects, but my mission would be to try to put a drill into every woman's hand, because it's so, so cool. And you just don't even know what you're capable of until you start doing something like that. So hopefully, watch a YouTube video, pick up a drill and just start making a shelf, anything.
That's so good. Putting a drill in every woman's hand. I love that.
Yeah, that would be good.
We'll have to stay tuned. I guess, will you be sharing those kinds of things on your Instagram page and that type of thing? And as you said, maybe a YouTube videos down the track.
Yeah, I would love to. I've got so many footage of me building my tiny house. What do you call those? Time lapses. And I would love to compile all of them together and actually get something out and then talk about all the mistakes and what to do, what not to do. So eventually it'll go out. I would love to, if I have a YouTube channel, I would love to call it Tiny Houses in a Big Shed, like you said before. I think that's such a good way of living your life. Yeah, eventually I think it's going to be on my Instagram. And I just have to start this as well. Like I said, I should follow my own advice. I just started. But yes, it will be on some kind of social media sometimes. Yeah.
Perfect. I think we're always ones to need to take our own advice, or always the last ones to take our own advice, even when we're, we know what we need to do.
We do. It's really good advice, but for following them, it's another story.
Yeah, exactly. And as we start to wrap up the conversation today, Marie, I would love to know from you, are there any misconceptions that you commonly hear about living in a tiny house?
Building a tiny house is going to probably make you really happy, and while you're building it, you're feeling like you align with your values a bit more, and I don't know, it feels like you've got a purpose and you're doing something really, really good. But having a tiny house is not going to necessarily make you happy. Not that I thought it would, but you have to be happy before it as well. And having a tiny house, because it was such a long time goal for me that I thought after building my tiny house, I would be happy for like life. But I'm like, oh, now I've got all of those other things that I need to do and all of those other projects. And I was a bit sad that I was like, why am I not like super, super happy after this? And I just wanted to say, like, it's such a massive goal and I was so happy building it. Then just work on as well, like you building yourself a lifestyles and you trying to be aligned with your values. Just also work on enjoying the moment and be happy with your life, however it's going, because you're doing something amazing and it's not the end of that chapter. And just having this massive goal is not going to solve other problems in your life, but it's going to be an amazing journey. But just try to also, take the time to actually find happiness as you go.
Yeah, it's an internal job, isn't it? It's not found externally.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a good advice, but I just saw all of those tiny house people, just they look really happy. I'm happy as well. I don't want to feel like I'm a sad person. They all look so, so happy, and we're always pumped to talk about our tiny house. So we look extremely happy when we talk about it. We all have a normal life, and after you build your tiny house, like life is going as per usual. And yeah, you just have to be careful. You're building your lifestyle, and it's amazing. But yeah, happiness or joy, I guess it's something else. And it's something that you have to work along the way. It's not when you've got like the job of your dream or whatever that you're actually going to be happy. And I find that it's a bit misleading when I hear all of those happy people having tiny houses, and we are really happy to have achieved this amazing thing, but it is something that I just want people to be aware of. Like, just work on it now. It's not going to solve many problems, but it is an amazing journey. I don't know if it's a good advice, but it's something.
No, but it's so true, right? What I'm hearing you say, of course, moving towards this lifestyle, living in a tiny house, it can make you happy on some level, as in like, okay, you're living a more simplified life and you're in nature and all of that. However, it's not the thing that's going to solve all your problems. And, the happiness comes from the inside rather than having this something that you obtain from the outside, like a tiny house. So yes, it can like bring you more into alignment with what's most true for you and how you want to live, but your happiness is still something that comes from the inside. And you're still going to have days where you have a really bad day or you're going through something really challenging, even though you are living in your tiny house. So it's not like a something that solves all of your problems. So yeah, it makes complete sense. It's I guess you're still going to go through your life, but you're just doing it in a different place, in a different way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know. And often what we see on social media and all of that, a lot of the highlight reels too, right? So it's cool to kind of get that inside experience and that real life, realist point of view, I suppose. So
yeah, it's just something I see all the time, and I'm like, sometimes I feel like I just don't want people to think that once they've got a tiny house, life is going to be perfect and their life is going to be so simple and easy. It is a big change and it's amazing, but it is, I guess it's what you said. It's like the danger of social media. Like, you see something and it looks amazing and shiny and you're like, yeah, I'm going to be so happy once I've got my tiny house. But yeah, it is something that it's just life. Keep going, and you just have to, whatever you learn during your tiny house building, I guess, like resilience and enjoying the small moment of joy when you achieve something, just try to keep that in mind and keep going with this, because I learned so many lessons, but I tend to forget them now, and I guess I'm gonna have to build another tiny house to be happy. But it's just that you've got so much like adrenaline from like one day you finish your day and you've got like an entire frame, or you like, there's a big step, you've got your floor, you like pumping for 3 days, you're like, yes, I've done this. And then when it stops, you've got your house and you're really happy. But it is like life keep going, and you have like that next project, but it's not suddenly rainbows and butterfly at the end of it. It's just really it's just normal life. But
yeah, life keeps happening. And wasn't it you that said in your Living Big in a Tiny House video, 100 bad days or 100 good stories?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm a big fan of just, coming to my friends and be like, you just let me tell you this story. What happened to me today? It's a good one. So I'm a big fan of this. I think I heard it in a song one day and I'm like, oh my God, this is my new mantra for the rest of my life. If nothing bad happens to you, I guess not too bad, but if you don't have any funny story to tell, like it's not really interesting. So I love when something bad happened to me, but it's going to be a good story. Can't be too bad, but it's like, if you can laugh about it, like at some point, then it's okay.
Exactly. No, it really resonated with me when I heard you say it too. And I often think that, maybe in the moment it doesn't seem like it's such a great thing, but then on the other side, as you say, you can laugh about it, you can take away lessons and experiences, and then you've always got a good story to tell your friends or your family. So that's there's something to be said for that. And Marie, are you able to let everyone know where they can come and find and connect with you online?
Yes, so I've got my Instagram. It's probably the easiest to contact me if anyone has anyone wants to come and help me, my tiny house land, just grow some tomatoes. My Instagram is just my name. So it's Marie, Marie _ Beringer. It's Beringer. I think my profile is public, so you can just, if anyone wants to message me or ask any questions, then they're welcome to, because this is what I want to do for the future, just really helping people building their own tiny houses. It'd be a dream.
Well, I will put your details in the show notes for anyone that wants to check you out, and you can find those show notes at tinyhouseconversations.com. So Marie, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for, sharing so generously with your stories and your experiences and the laughs. I really appreciate you being here. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Lucia. I love your podcast, and thank you for allowing me to talk about myself for an hour.
My pleasure. And if you're listening to us at home, thank you so much for being here as well. Stay tuned every Thursday for new episodes of Tiny House Conversations, and I'll see you next time. Thanks again for listening. And if you enjoyed the conversation today, you found it valuable, and you want to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is to share the love. That way I can keep bringing you more tiny house conversations to help you on your own tiny journey. So here are 3 ways that you can support the podcast. Number 1, if you have a friend or family member that you feel would benefit from hearing these conversations, feel free to share it with them, email them, text them, send them a telegram, do whatever you need to do to share it with them. Number 2, if you hit the subscribe button, you'll know exactly when the next episode is live. And number 3, if you head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to podcasts and leave a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much in advance. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next episode.